I will, let's see.
Oh, Kristen.
Hi, guys.
We miss you.
I miss you too.
Oh, what this one looks like.
It's cleaned up.
That might, yeah, it might look different.
I don't know. It looks back like
It kind of, yeah, kind of does.
I tried.
Only, it's not as bad.
Lasts about 5 weeks.
Okay, so where's my
Yes.
okay. So I'm going to throw this in the chat window. Okay. So I figured the way we're going to start this off, we would talk a little bit about what we're doing on our campus and see if anyone had comments or similar experiences or wanted to add anything in general. And then after we get done talking, if anybody else would like to share what they're up to, success stories, just some, we really want to talk about some of the things that we're incurring in the planning stages of getting things remediated, training staff and faculty, things of that nature, not really getting into the nitty gritty of this is accessibility and, you know, getting into the weeds. But with us today, I'm Dan Laird. I'm with Campus Technology Services at SUNY Oswego. John Moriarty, our CTO. Becca Mushtek. That's it, right? You're in our graphic design department. And Rick Buck with our communications and marketing. Yeah. So, so I want to talk about some of the things that we're doing on campus, and these three are going to help me do that. We have a few committees on campus, which we are all a part of here. I can't recall the two different names of them.
Yeah, okay, well, because I pulled up the agenda. Well, first of all, I want to say hi and welcome. And I know we've got some people on here who know a lot about accessibility. I see Mark's here. Kristen's been heavily involved with while we were working. In terms of accessibility and steering and committees, we have a steering committee which would consist of representatives really from a variety of the sections of campus. So one would be extended learning, where we do a lot of online learning and course development is inside there. We have our disability services is involved. Rebecca is a representative from the academic side, and she also runs a second committee, which is the academic accessibility. And then Rick is from marketing. He's really our digital marketing,
Digital services.
Digital services, and runs our website. So we have representatives from those three different, really like 5 different areas. But we set out an agenda and things that we've been working on, a number of items. Some of it is remediation to go and get from one spot to the other. But another part of it is trying to be proactive in terms of how we can go and get ahead and be better off than where we are. And really kind of going, and I would say we use some of the materials that NASLE has created in terms of the accessibility draft policy that they're going to try to do that.
To add to that, we do have a collection of accessibility resources on a page that we have for staff and faculty to go back to. Let me see. We'll post that for all of you. Okay.
So Dan, as you're doing that, one quick question, have you adopted an accessibility policy at Oswego?
No, we haven't. We don't have an accessibility policy, and one of the main reasons is because SUNY is going to come out with an accessibility policy. So I think we were waiting for that. I would say we've gone back and looked at all of our accessibility processes and procedures, and we've really tried to focus a couple of areas. Let's say in terms of the website in particular, we've done a tremendous amount of work to make it accessible, as everybody's done since the OCR complaint. But I'd say like we really try to go back to the root cause and as much as we can. We're looking at procedures inside procurement. And I know a number of us are gathering for Mark's present webcast that he's going to do in the next week or so. And we're spending a lot of time on the academic side to go back and to educate faculty. And Rebecca can talk about some of the things we're doing there. But no policy at this point, although we have seen the draft of SUNY's accessibility report.
Got it. So we kind of took a little bit different tact. I was on on NASLI's committee writing that policy, so I had a good idea what was going to be in it. So we basically duplicated it at UB, and that policy was adopted in May. And it's been nice to be able to point back to that so people understand that this isn't just because of the OCR remediation complaint, but it actually is now kind of official policy regardless of if that complaint came through or not.
Do you have a URL for that, Mark?
What's that? Yes, let me post that for folks.
Cool. Thank you.
Beyond like the policies that let me just cover some of the highlights of that, Mark.
Hang on one second. Let me just get this. So one of the things that has happened on our campus, and I think a few other campuses within SUNY were doing this, is we have renegotiated our remediation agreement with the OCR. And it is much simpler for us now. What was a 5-page remediation agreement is now a 1.5 pages. The two big changes that were negotiated, one is we don't have to provide 6-month update reports to the OCR. And the argument was we'd rather be fixing things and telling you what we're doing. So that actually is a big kind of relief for us in terms of the amount of paperwork we needed to provide with them. The other one that was really interesting for me, especially talking with our attorneys, is that there is no specific reference to any web standard in the new remediation agreement. So in our original remediation agreement, it said very specifically we would meet the WCAG 2.0 AA standard and the ARIA 1.0 standard. So there is no language like that in the new agreement. It basically says you are going to make your sites accessible. So I was fascinated about that from a legal aspect, because how is that enforceable? You don't, how do you define what is accessible and not accessible? But one of the things that, I have been talking with SUNY Council at length about this is that it's not as easy as checking the compliance box that something is accessible, because so much of it is subjective and open to interpretation that what one person thinks is a decorative image, for example, another person may not think it's a decorative image. Is an alternative text written exactly the way it's supposed to be written? So the approach we're taking at UB is focusing more on the level of accessibility challenges. This is not in the current policy, which I'm going to actually put into the chat window right now. But one of the things we're trying to do is focus on the level of the barrier. And this actually I'm going to talk about in the webinar I'm doing next Tuesday on procurement, because we're taking the same approach for third-party software. And we look at a scale of 1 to 5 when it comes to accessibility, from the least accessible to the most accessible. So something that we categorize as a 1 means that it's a complete barrier for somebody with a disability to use. They simply cannot make that website or that product work. Something that we categorize as a 2 means that it is possible to use it, but the user experience is just awful. What would take, me 2 minutes to use might take somebody else a half hour to use because there's just so many hurdles to jump through. Something that's categorized as a 3 means it's not perfect. There's some accessibility issues, but they're relatively minor. Something categorized as a 4 means that it does meet the WCAG 2.0 AA standard. And then something categorized as a 5 means that especially with a vendor, they've gone above and beyond. It meets the AAA standard. The vendor has shown a commitment to accessibility. They share their roadmap about accessibility. They have it built into their processes. So that's kind of the approach we're taking at UB now with our remediation agreement, is instead of focusing on every single AA standard and success criteria, we are focusing first on the ones that provide barriers. And it's really an interesting discussion on campus and I would encourage all the campuses to do this, is talk about specific issues and where does it fit on that scale of 1 to 5. So for example, one of the things we have discovered on many of our websites, the color contrast in some of the navigational elements is 4.45 to 1. Can anybody really see the difference between 4.45 and 4.5 to 1? No. So even though that technically is a AA standard, it really has minimal impact on what happens. The flip side of that for me is something around keyboard accessibility. If you have things on your web page that are not keyboard accessible, that can be a complete barrier. So we are really focusing a lot of our attention on keyboard accessibility and really kind of looking at it through that lens of what is the barrier, what's the effort, as opposed to whether it's an A, AA, or AAA standard. So hopefully I have just saved this. So I posted our policy to the chat. We are probably going to rewrite that a little bit based on what I just described, because in our web accessibility policy at UB, it does specifically mention the WCAG 2.0 AA standard. And one of the things I'm really interested in now is, when does WCAG 2.1 become an issue for, even for Section 508? I have sat in on a number of webinars over the last 2 months, and nobody is really willing to say when that will happen, especially as part of Section 508. But I think if you're looking down the road, you really need to be aware of what WCAG 2.1, what the implications are for that, because there are certain things in there that may be a pretty heavy lift in terms of programming. So one of the big things for me, and we do a lot of this at UB, is we have a lot of dynamic menus, and the word I like to use is that they're very twitchy. If you move your mouse just a little bit, the menu opens and closes, and it's sometimes hard to control when that happens. So if you have some dexterity issues with a mouse, that's a huge issue, and it's actually one of the standards in WCAG 2.1. So I actually got some of our developers now thinking about what are we going to do in terms of how we meet that new standard. Another one is, they call it reflow in WCAG 2.1, and the best way to translate that is responsive design. It basically is saying that all sites need to be responsive to be part, to meet the WCAG 2.1 standard. So a little bit off on a tangent there, but that's some of the things we've been working on in terms of policy and just looking at how we're going to approach this. I just sent that link out. Yep.
The web accessibility policy?
So I just shared it in the chat. It should be there.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm looking at. The same. Yeah, May 10. Okay. Anybody else have a policy?
Yeah, that's really no.
Okay. One other question I wondered, how many people are on remediation plans? Or were other people able to resolve the situation?
So I'm curious about that as well. I know the last I had talked with Nasli about this, there were 5 or 6 SUNY campuses that had to, that entered into a remediation agreement. UB was one of those. I know Geneseo was one of those, and I'm not sure of anyone else.
Oh, I know there were a few others. We were very lucky, I guess, to resolve the situation. So.
Kelly, is there a way to do a poll? If you're still with us.
What was the question? I'm sorry.
Doing a poll and
Yeah, I could do a poll.
access to it.
I can put it up for you. It might be too late though.
It's okay.
It's all right.
Put it in your group. I could put it in your group if you want. Just message me what it is. I'm just lurking. Don't mind me. Dan says that purchase is remediating.
Yeah, I did a full audit report for the Department of Education. I trained some people in how to audit. They weren't even software developers, but you don't have to be to learn how to properly quality assure or QA something. And we did a full report. It's a 5,000-page website. We did a sample. Mostly hit upon stuff that's template level, stuff that's reoccurring, especially that really matters because most college campuses use a content management system so that they can, source everybody's information from different offices and programs. So it's really hard to kind of control what gets put on that website. So you can have a completely accessible website from the template level. So you kind of have to hit it from the other end that you have to train all your content managers. So that was also part of our agreement that we would train everybody who could edit the website and make anything that's publishable. So I wrote 3 different training sessions, one about documents, accessible documents, one about making accessible CMS content, and another one about just like an understanding what accessibility is and what it matters. I pretty much incorporated those, the documents and what it matters into the CMS training, and I gave it to over 230 different people at 20 different sessions. It's as being the only web developer and doing that at the same time was it was not easy, but it was doable. And I think it really helped, and it really opened people's eyes. And once we approach it kind of like this is a rights issue, and you want to make sure everybody has the same ability and access to these things, and it makes a big difference. So yeah, we have a lot of things that were on our plate, and those are just a few of them that I'd mentioned. But it's not really anybody's job, so we just kind of it's almost somewhat voluntary in a lot of respects. But yeah, we're moving forward, making progress. Department of Education is happy with what we're doing, but it's a lot of work to be done. And will the 5,000-page website be fully accessible ever? I mean, realistically, depends on what your standards are, but probably not. But making honest efforts, making real progress, appeasing the lawyers at the Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights. These are things that there are ways to do it and there are ways not to. So also working with the lawyer and find the right language and collaborating on a team, because you really can't do this alone. And we've created a team. We've created created a position for now that they're training staff. So someone's focused on faculty and what are they putting in Moodle, how to make that accessible so we're not having inaccessible course content for students. We have a chief diversity officer is also taking accessibility under their mantle, and we do regular team meetings, like similarly to what's going on there in Albany and Buffalo. I'm sure we're all just try to do at least a bi-monthly or a weekly or once a month meeting to follow up on these things. And we're going to conferences. Going to the HEAD conference in November. I'm going to be speaking at the LiveWell conference next week about accessibility, and really just getting the college's name out there really helps in attaching it to accessibility. I think has helped our cause a lot more. And I'll just updating yourself, going to these conferences, attending these webinars, the laws are changing, rules are changing, even rulings are changing. I mean, if you're a lawyer, you have to know about the latest rulings. I mean, that's what applies. So if, you know, there was a ruling last week on a case that you're on, that would apply to your current case. And if you don't get the latest law journal or, you know, what happened, then you may not know the way that the judge rules. So keeping your ear to the ground makes a big difference. But really just that groundswell to understand that this is a rights issue has changed the minds of a lot of faculty and staff members to be like, okay, this is important. And, you know, and if they don't want to think about it from that perspective, you can think about it from the perspective that this is, you know, it's like knowing Microsoft Word, or knowing, you know, how to use it properly, or how to make a web page properly, or how to make an email properly. This is the way, you know, this is ensuring that you're doing it the right way, you know, so it's a feather in your cap. It's a thing you can add to your LinkedIn profile. So, you know, really getting the buy-in of the campus is the only way this is going to happen. And so far they seem happy with the trainings and the content we're giving them.
Good.
So Dan, I also will be at the Accessing Higher Ground Conference in Denver in November. So I think we should make sure that any SUNY folks who are attending that, we know about that, can have a little bit meet up when we're out there.
Yeah, I mean, and it is interesting that, you know, this stuff keeps changing. I mean, there was just that I was posting stuff about, like, the DOJ just was you know, reviewing what are you really required to do to make something accessible. It doesn't really mean, you know, WCAG 2.0 or 2.1 standards or YRA 1.1 standards. It's right. You know, that definition it can change, but before, a lot of people are under the assumption that this means absolutely this. So yeah, the more we collaborate and get together, that'll be awesome.
Yep. And then Sean, did you go to EDUCAUSE this year?
That is in 2 weeks. I'm going.
Okay. Yeah, I'm curious about how much this is going to be discussed at EDUCAUSE, and whether, I know there are some working groups around this, but I wonder if they have some information that might be valuable to everybody at SUNY.
Yeah. You know what? I will. They just sent me the agenda to start planning what's there, and I will. And I'll take a look and maybe report back on Tuesday.
Great. Excellent.
Is anybody going to the one in California, CSUN?
Pending budget approval, yes, I am.
Okay, I have a old coworker of mine is out there. I wish I could have gone to see him. He went with me last time, Herman Furman. He was a blind help desk tech lead who left to work for Northern Arizona State, just, you know, lower cost of living, higher pay,
right.
Blah, blah, blah. But he's going to be there. So if you get a chance, he's a guy with the German Shepherd, and just like a great laugh. He's a good dude.
Okay,
excellent.
Excellent.
To meet him. Yeah, and he's very involved in the movement.
Is it great?
Yeah, he actually got training from Illinois Champlain.
Mm-hmm.
I got certified there, and the guy who's leading the program, the two of them are going to be doing a presentation.
Okay, great.
I don't know if anyone was able to attend the Drupal camp last week at Cornell, but there were some good discussions from staff at Cornell about how they're handling accessibility. And there's also, I think Princeton, they had a presentation about some of their procedures, and those are going to be on video. So if I'm able to, I'll share those with the group on Workplace.
Does everybody have Site Improve? Well, most people.
Yeah, we're using it. I mean, you can use the plugin in the browser, but you know, we definitely signed up for the program. I mean, there's a bunch of them that are free where you can just run like an audit of your page, but that comprehensive dashboard, obviously it's not cheap. I mean, you pay for it. It's nice to have, and then you can pull reports. And now what I've done is I've created sections of the website. You know, naturally when you make a website, it's like, you know, folder structure for your own files. So all right, this is for the human resources office, so it goes under the human resources section. And what you can do is you can just take a certain number of pages and then you can make a report on it, and then report on the accessibility, the search engine optimization, and then that can be automatically delivered as often as you like. And I think like doing that once a month to like department heads is very useful, because in my case where we have so many content managers, I mean 230 people that could break the accessibility of the website, it's good that you have that executive level buy-in with like, okay, yeah, this is how we're doing. Oh, our score is going up or down. These are the latest mistakes or fixes.
Have you rolled it out then in that way?
Oh yeah, no, it wasn't too bad. Yeah, they were very good working with us on that.
Notice that they just opened up their academy section. They have the analyst that we on 2 months ago to help us with our online course materials, mediating a lot of that. But she's also going through and kind of evaluating some of the offerings in there. We're trying to earmark specific ones and see how useful that would be to roll it out to some of our, I would say, like power users, some of our content editors that we know are a little savvier than others. Just try to build some momentum or awareness, some education within offices. I thought that was nice that they just unlocked. Pretty expensive before, but I'm not sure.
And some of the stuff that I test drove, I wasn't that impressed with. I got a lot more out of DayQ, to be honest. And I felt like DayQ has a lot better structure to it. And I work with, I'm on having a leadership position at the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. I highly advocate people join IAP. It's, there's always new stuff posted all the time, and you get to collaborate, and people will ask things, but they also have a curriculum that they're building, helping them build a search tool right now, so that it's kind of like these are all the training things that are free out there, and it's putting it in one place, because right now it is a hot topic and people are rushing out with training materials, but to what level and how good are they? If you want to get certifications and things like that, you're going to be in a big rush to possibly get as much information as you can at once. But is it really relevant? Does it really help? I mean, especially if you start a different group of material, it's like you're hearing the same stuff over and over again. So that's why I just preferred, because at least I started with DayQ, because when I started doing the site improve stuff, I was like, and I didn't like what I saw, but it was like the 101 stuff, so I can't really speak to their higher level training.
Right. So let me jump in about Site Improve. I've been working with them over the last 3 months on their academy. They gave me early access to the courses, and I have kind of two issues with Site Improve's academy. One is the true value of it, because I have found that from a tactical perspective, in terms of what you have to do, the information is a little bit lacking. If I wanted to have somebody go, you need to go fix your Word documents and your PDFs and make them accessible, sending them through that course, I don't think is going to give them the skill set they need to do that. The second is even the pedagogy behind it. Most of the people on my campus want a manual, a written manual, where how do we, change the language in Microsoft Word again from default to English? And going through a video to try to find that isn't necessarily, to me, the best way to do that. The second and probably more important issue for us was the cost. So they were quoted, we are an enterprise client of Site Improve. We have unlimited page count, unlimited PDF count. And for us, if we wanted to have that available to our campus for all users, the price tag was going to be $100,000 a year.
Yeah.
That's just way beyond any budget that we would have to do that. And when I looked at the quality of the material, I just didn't think it provided enough benefit. So whether conversations with me had any impact on that at all, I'm not sure, but they now have opened this up to all Site Improve customers. Although I was on the webinar on Tuesday and it was unclear to me exactly how many people get access, and, because if you aren't an enterprise customer, I think 20 people can have access to the academy. So how?
Yeah,
get around that. And even on my campus, they said 100 people could have access to it. I have several hundred people in Site Improve, so how do I control who does that? And right now, anybody who's a Site Improve user can sign up and start taking courses without me as the administrator being able to control that. So I like the idea, but I'm not sure if that's the best way, especially given the cost. I have not used the Q's training. I have been in conversations with the Paciello group about their training offerings. And right now they have a full suite of products. I have not looked at it yet, but they have a full suite of courses and the price is half of what Site Improves is. So this is something I'm hoping that SUNY as a system can try to leverage a little bit. So even if it's with Site Improve, instead of looking at each individual campus as an individual license, can we look at this as the SUNY, in its entirety, and maybe give us a little break on the pricing? I've had conversations with Nasli about this, and certainly something I think we should be pursuing.
Oneana also uses Site Improve. I just recently found Moncito is a competitor to Site Improve. When we first signed up with Site Improve, it seems like they were the only one in the field. But this Moncito seems to be right there with all of the same offerings, accessibility, analytics, policies. So that'll be something for us to consider in the future when it comes to pricing.
Yep, so I am very familiar with both products. Moncito, the price point is about 1/3 of Site Improves. So if your campus is really concerned about cost, definitely look at that. It does not have some of the features and functionality in terms of how you manage sites and how you manage users and access to things. So depending on how complex your environment is, it may not have the same kind of user experience. So, but certainly is something to look at, and the tools themselves are fairly similar. Although, so Moncito though does not have necessarily some of the more in-depth capability that Site Improve has. So for example, the Site Improve policy tool, which I use all of the time, Moncito doesn't really have an equivalent to that.
That's one of the biggest pieces that we use in Site Improve on a daily basis.
Yep, same with us.
But yeah, we would love to see something SUNY-wide. That would be great.
Yep, so even whether it's something as simple as putting Site Improve on a SUNY, on state contract would be great. But I'd like to see them price it in such a way that they look at the camp, at the SUNY system itself, so people can benefit from pricing. So we'll see where those conversations go. That's way above my pay grade, but I continue to kind of push that conversation.
We appreciate it. And you had asked earlier about remediation agreements. Somehow we got lucky in Oneana. We do not have a remediation agreement. We were able to get through without it. I'm not sure. It seemed at the end there that we didn't even have our investigators. I'm not even sure who they were. But we were able to, I guess, just show good measure that we were really working hard. We had a plan in place to continue to remediate, and we were able to get away without it.
Good. I wish I could say the same.
You want to talk about like academic support? And I know you said that I paid for that I hired her, but Rebecca trained her, and that's far more than anything else. So I'm just wondering what others are doing around academic. I mean, we could start and talk about. Yeah. Go ahead, talk about.
So we have a work group on accessible teaching. I'm a faculty member. I'm also a graphic designer, and I teach graphic design. So I have a background in accessibility. I teach that in my classes. So we started doing some work and outreach to figure out ways to get faculty to get on board, and we decided that you kind of need some people to be models for others. And so we're excited about a fellow program that we developed for each of our schools, so that we have at least one fellow from each school that will be trained one-on-one and then commit to making one entire class fully accessible, go to some training, and then share that back out with their schools and departments, so that we're planning to have people in those positions in the spring.
Right now, it looks like we have
We
five. We have one.
We have people committing, so that's good. This fall, I went through kind of what we're expecting those fellows to do, and have made my class fully accessible. I don't teach online, but I teach a lot of digital media stuff. So all my assignment sheets, all of my email communication with students is fully accessible, and being a good model for that. So when I do presentations and things, I make sure that I think about not just digital accessibility, but also accessibility from just looking at the screen and what's there, even if it's not going to be shared out visually. And even notes and stuff that I share with colleagues on committees and things, I make sure are structured and follow best practices as well. And they say it takes 66 days to make a habit. I'm getting really close. So
How dare you?
Let me just suggest to Dan too, that we have the accessibility fellowship description on the website, on our oswego.edu/accessibility. There's on the left-hand side of the screen, there's a link. So, sorry.
That's okay. So we're doing that, and then we're also doing a pilot project with a specific department who buys in already. So our curriculum and instruction folks really have a social justice kind of flavor to their curricula. So they were into accessibility. So they have committed a couple of their faculty to be on our ally pilot, as well as kind of piloting some other templates and things that we're trying. So like Word document templates and things that have better styles for readability, that are also using good contrast in the colors, because of course the defaults in Word are not accessible. So we're experimenting with that small group to figure out what works and what resonates with faculty. And then I've also done some trainings with specific groups. So I'm in the School of Communication, Media, the Arts, and I did a training for the entire faculty of the School of Communication, Media, the Arts at the start of this semester, to actual very positive feedback. So we're hoping that that will continue to, people are now more aware, they're asking questions, and so that hopefully will make a difference.
No, Linda.
What's that?
Thin light blue heading fonts are accessible.
No.
Too true. So yeah, we've got the fellow program. We're working on like a department by department remediation policy right now. I don't know if we want to go into how we're tackling that or not.
You mean in terms of the
CNI side? What we're working on now as we go through the website, as far as doing an audit and seeing the inventory of digital documents out there. So,
well, we're a long ways away, I think.
Yeah. I mean, we're at the point now. We're leveraging Site Improve. We have an intern going through and fixing the low level, just the easy things. Our template's accessible, so we corrected that almost immediately. We didn't have too many accessibility issues within our template, but we have way too many PDFs and documents and files that have been orphaned that really in some cases aren't even linked anymore, but Google still finds them, and they have accessibility issues within there. So we're going through and doing an audit of this content right now. We're going to be doing kind of what Dan had mentioned with Site Improve, and be rolling out reports to each site owner and the editors within that site. So we have 150 sites, 155 sites, and I don't know how many editors have lost track of that. 300 something. Yeah, it's a decent size. So we've been kind of going through that, and again, something very similar to what Purchase is doing, where we want people to see kind of what their accessibility score is on a month-to-month basis. We'll be taking a look and see if we can pull that right into Drupal, so that it's one of the main panels that they can actually access right when they log in and are looking at their content, the content tab, that they can see basically what is the accessibility score of their site right now and if they've made any progress on it. For the last few months, though, our primary focus had been on online courses because we had some students that, needed transcripts and some other items for them to actually even be able to participate in the class. So we went ahead and worked with our banner group and developed a report that brings back basically a listing of the courses of anybody that is registered. It doesn't have personal information. It just gives us a listing of courses and a head count of how many students are in that course that may need some accommodations. And so what we're trying to do is proactively go in, audit, and remediate where appropriate the course material, so the course is fully accessible and we don't end up in the accommodation mode. As students are completing modules and going forward that way. So that's really been our focus the last few months, and now we're kind of shifting back to looking at the site and kind of improving the overall accessibility. Our main thing right now is really the documents that people upload. Our VP of Student Affairs, she told her directors not to be putting PDFs on the website anymore. And so, which is great. I don't care. That started a conversation, which I think, those conversations need to be had. And so we ended up being invited to talk to her at her director's meeting and got a lot of questions. And we tried to basically push the point of what is the intended use of this content that you're putting on the website. In a lot of cases, we've had people that are creating flyers and posters and digital signage, and then the printer or whoever else will hand them a PDF and will say, oh, let's just throw that on the website. And we're saying, no, don't do that. Don't even think about doing that. The intended use of that material that you just created was, to mail to somebody. I guarantee you that that is not accessible. So we're just trying to get people to think about things in that way. What is the intended use of your content? And really just trying to take baby steps with regards to how you create content. Just, a lot of people aren't even really aware of how to structure their content the right way using headings. And so, I don't want to overload people. I don't want them to think that, I think, Mark, you made a really good point at STC. We don't want to be seen as the accessibility police. We want to, we want them to understand that we're there to help them and guide them. And these are kind of the main points. And if people just would start off by creating structured, accessible content, they've really, done a large part of the work to make something accessible. So, with regards to the site, like I said, we're just kind of getting back to that now. But yeah, the people that are creating the content, they need to understand how to create accessible content. And yeah, that's kind of where we're at.
I think we pulled out the five big things that we thought would be easiest for faculty and staff to not be familiar with accessibility things to learn, but also have the biggest impact for people. And those are the things that we captured on our website as faculty and staff.
And what are those 5 things?
You can check them out on our accessibility website.
I will. All right.
The things that you would expect,
Well,
and alt text, clear links, etc.
so I think electronic documents is like the elephant in the room that makes us all very afraid. At UB, we did a scan of our Blackboard installation and found out last year there were 260,000 documents posted. So how do you begin to make that accessible? So one of the things we're looking at when it comes to PDFs is making sure, I don't want to try to make every PDF perfect, because you can go down a rabbit's hole and just spend so much time trying to get the reading order perfect. So what I want to do is come up with a list of some high-level things that are relatively easy to do, which is why I was asking about kind of what your approach to that has been. Because I have found that you can do some things to PDFs relatively quickly that get you pretty far down the road of making those accessible.
I wanted to note that we were developing a PDF training. We haven't given it yet, but we had someone trained by Adobe, and they're going to have a training at the head conference for train the trainer. So you get trained by Adobe, get certified as an Adobe trainer and how to make accessible PDFs, and then you can train other people to train people. So it's kind of like one of those things where you're kind of like a hub and spoke model. But the one thing that they tell you first is don't use PDFs if you can avoid it. You know, like
Right.
And Herman will tell you, my former coworker, that he hated PDFs. I mean, because PDFs don't have any of the rules of the original programs you built it in. So, for instance, if you build something in Microsoft Word, when I interact with that using assistive technology, there's certain shortcuts and things I'm expecting that it's going to work this way in Microsoft Word. I can use all the same kinds of shortcuts to jump to headings. Or jump to links and images, and that changes if I'm going to a web page. So, but it gets worse in PDFs because none of those understandings or rules or even the interactions with assistive technology is the same, and you kind of have to bake them into it. So now all those rules you have to add to these things when they were baked into it by default. That's Microsoft Word. Some of the stuff that you have there, like some of the tagging sometimes gets lost when you convert it. And depending on how you save it as a PDF, it could be just nothing more than a blank image if you print it or something like that. So, I mean, they say first and foremost, avoid it if you can because of that. But one of the big general recommendations I always tell people is make it a web page first because generally speaking, for assistive technology, they're primarily built to work the same regardless of like whether it's voiceover or talkback or JAWS or any of the other assistive technologies out there, where Word could update, and PDF could update, and they're all, or I should say, Adobe Acrobat could update, and even so, like the programs themselves are very different, but the interactions from assistive technology is also very different. It's not as baseline as a web page is, because of just the cleanliness of the tags and how it's made, but also just the expectations and what these assistive technology companies are gearing their code for. So if you make a web page, that's the best. If not, keep it in the original program. If it's an Excel spreadsheet, keep it in an Excel spreadsheet if you can. And if it is a PDF, try to avoid complicated things like forms and stuff like that, because there's a lot of programs out there too. But again, you can make it accessible, but that's how they pretty much preface the whole program before they even teach you how to make these things accessible. But we also talk about forms too. For accessible forms, there's a lot of private stuff that goes on at colleges, like social security numbers, credit card information. I found it enlightening to talk to our IT security department about that, because it's not so much necessarily accessibility, but when you make things on a website or stored in a server, it does create some issues. So you might have some push and pull of whether you have to keep something a PDF or not, or a PDF form or not. But making forms accessible PDFs is entirely different class on its own. But again, you could have two different classes on it, but preferably it's done through a secure third party, and then you don't have to deal with any of that stuff. They made it accessible. They attest to it. You test it, make sure it works, and that's what you use instead. But yeah, so I mean that. But I definitely recommend going to the head conference and taking that training, because then, I mean, if nothing else, it's a nice feather in the cap. So I'm certified by Adobe, but at the end of the day, it gives you the real. It gives anybody who's training someone in making PDFs accessible that scope. That let's make it a web page first.
Note, Dan, that the top 5 things that we listed are all things that you can do in any of those like original pieces of software, right? So we picked things that were like that, and they were also picked because I work with students who have to deal with that kind of stuff as students all the time, and those are the common things that people make the most mistakes on. So that's where a lot of that came from and why it's maybe framed in the way that it is.
At Oneana, similar to Dan, we're definitely trying to get rid of as many PDFs as we can. Our first plan of attack is converting informational PDFs to web pages, and then we're really looking at our tons of forms We've adopted Microsoft Office 365. So we're trying to use the form tool whenever we can. We're still in a battle about digital signatures and whether we can accept those. But our current plan for forms is if it's a simple form or even if it's a form at all, that it has to remain as a PDF. We've actually started to outsource the remediation. So we've used a company called BrailleWorks because we just can't resource that in-house. And nobody wants to teach anybody how to do it because we don't even know how to do it. So we're just going with, we're going to have to outsource all of these forms. And that's the cost of doing business to have it on our website or to have it made publicly available. So we are outsourcing that piece. Quickly for the academic side, I can't speak to it too much, but we use Blackboard, and I know that we just purchased a product, Ally, that sits on top of Blackboard that's supposed to give some high-level accessibility reports on your files. So I know that users are instructed to go and check that out.
So have you been happy with BrailleWorks so far?
We have. So me being cautious and not knowing whether, how much should you be getting paid per page? And even though you give me a certificate of compliancy, how do I know that that's true and how that it's accurate? We have a web support vendor for our Drupal instance, and they have an accessibility expert in their agency. So I actually had them check it, and they were also happy with it. So that gave me the confidence that we could trust it and that we could go forward with it.
Great. And how about just their general prices?
Well, so at first it started at over $50 a page. And these are complex fillable forms. So it was over $50 a page. And then we were able to somehow negotiate it down to in a 20-ish, $25 to $28 a page. And we're talking 1 to 2 page forms. We haven't gone into a 10-page form yet. They do say that it's front loaded because a lot of the information is at the file level. So I'm hoping that per page it would go down. We're currently inventorying all of our PDFs and trying to determine a final number of what we're actually looking at so that I can go back and try and negotiate that even lower, I'm hoping. I did have a conversation as well with Common Look. I don't know what their product looks like, but they say the same thing, that they'll provide a certificate of compliancy. So that'll be at least me getting a second quote and seeing how they come out with it.
Okay. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have to wrap up because this room is going to be a meeting. So I just wanted to thank everybody for participating. We're going to have the video available for this, and I'll grab the transcript. So we're going to be having a roundtable at SUNY Wizard, so if anybody can make it, we'd love to have you there. We'll also try to schedule another call like this afterwards. So really appreciate everyone taking part with us.
It was great. We'll see many next Tuesday at Mark's session.
Thanks, everyone.